So welcome to my workshop. I'm really happy to be here. Thank you to Figment for this opportunity. And I'd like to start with a land acknowledgement. So I want to acknowledge that I live and work in Toronto, which is part of the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and Wendat peoples. And Toronto is part of Treaty 13 and also falls within the centuries-old Dish with One Spoon Covenant. And that was a treaty between the Anishinaabe, Mississaugas, and Haudenosaunee. And it bound those nations to share the territory and to respect the land. And newcomers have been incorporated into that officially actually in 1764 with the Royal Proclamation on the Treaty of the Niagara. So thank you everyone for being here. I'm Shawn. When Nobody Was Here is part of my MFA project, and it goes back. I can just give a little bit of information about it. No, I'm not actually, like, I see myself on the screen. I don't see everyone who is here, but I would like, if everybody would like to introduce themselves, I'm really welcome that. And maybe just raise your hand if you'd like to introduce yourself or speak. And I was just reading the chat there, sorry. But anyway, I'll just continue on with the project. What I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen and start a slideshow about my presentation. And then after we do that, there will also be some people who are working on the project with me, and they're going to show some of their collaborations for that. And then we'll get into what everyone has signed up for, and that is making one of the carrier bags. And this is a sample of one. It's a small one. And we're going to do that by hand. If you have a sewing machine, that's fine too. And then we'll move on to that. So I'll just get on with sharing my screen. Okay, so here is the screen. So when nobody was here, these words are the words of my daughter, Sage, and she came home from school one day after a history lesson about the pioneers, and it was referring to the area where we lived, which was Scarborough at the time, as a place where was when nobody was here. And so my children, 3 children, whose fathers from the Dene Nation in northern Saskatchewan. And so we went to the school to address that. In today's language, it would be called erasure, a cultural erasure. It was really a pivotal moment in my life. It's when I experienced for the first time a moment of historical erasure. I was really surprised that the school would be teaching that there was nobody here in front of a classroom of primarily Indigenous children. So we did a project called Buffalo Jump Ahead from that, and that was a project of the art event. It involved making big life-size buffalo puppets that were used in a processional piece of art, and that was to assert the presence of the Indigenous community in Scarborough and to give room for everyone's history to be included in the school curriculum. And the school was on board with that, and really pleased to have that contribution to the curriculum. Anyway, it's an ongoing conversation, and I know, I didn't know at the time, but then obviously I've learned since it's been a 300-year-old conversation, or more, actually 351, I think. And it continues today, especially it's in the news right now. It has been for the summer as more and more bodies are being recovered from the residential camps. that the Canadian government and Catholic, primarily Catholic Church, ran. And those just ended in 1997, I believe the last one was closed. So my project stems from that Buffalo Jump Ahead project. That project continued for 13 years. The last couple of years we made a banner, and we placed that banner on a wooden carousel. And I was always really mesmerized by that carousel. It was a red banner and it orbited in Trinity Bellwoods Park, and it was just so magical. I've always wanted to do another one. And so that's what I'm working on with this project. So in comes the pandemic, as everybody knows. And what I ended up doing during the pandemic was I spent a lot of time in my local park, Grange Park. And I thought that I would use Grange Park as the basis of the banner that I want to make for the project. So this was just kind of the visual of this part right here, just being what I envisioned for the base of the banner. And the idea for the project was to invite people to collaborate on it in a way that they felt comfortable. And I wanted to base it on the idea of generational knowledge, because that knowledge is passed from generation to generation. And then if it's not, there can be a loss, and and people can experience grief from not having that. But then it's also really wonderful to acknowledge the knowledge that we do carry from our parents or from societies, and we can challenge them and critique them as well. This is another view of the park. Every day I was going in during the pandemic because that was the only place I could go. And so there's this little cluster of trees that I ended up just walking around every day. And I use those as the basis for the composition of the banner. And here's the actual banner. It's 45 feet long, 4 feet tall. And this was it before people have started contributing. There's about a dozen people who are making items all based on the imagery of the tree, and it's open to a broad interpretation of ideas. Initially, I had wanted everybody to hold the banner, and that we would form a sorry, I'm just trying to a carousel, a human carousel with it. And once we're able to, and once the COVID restrictions have lifted, I'm hoping that we'll be able to carry it, and then we'll be able to experience that moment that I experienced in Trinity Bellwoods Park, watching that red banner orbit. And this time it'll be like we're holding our history, and we're holding our personal histories and collective histories that we bring to the present moment. And it helps us position ourselves in all the networks of things that are going on in the world. This was just in the studio. Sorry, that's a really dark image. I should have lightened that up a bit. I was just playing with the fabrics, deciding what to do. I was collecting a bunch of fabrics, and I was making kits to give to people to do their work. This is the first piece that came. This is from Ingrid, and she did these lino cut prints. And the way she did it is she rolled ink onto a surface, and then rolled her roller over that. Then she put the lino cuts underneath the banner, and then rolled the ink-filled roller on top of that. And then we got these images, which I really love. And these are all images of flora and fauna from this area, which is Southern Ontario. But the interesting thing is that these a lot of these flora actually are located in other parts of the world as well, and they've either migrated here, or they've migrated naturally, or through colonization, or whatever. When we did have Zoom meetings for the project, and the idea of invasive species, we talked a lot about that in one of our meetings. So that's one of the contributions to the banner. And this is another one from Carol, and she interpreted her name and put together this collage of fabrics. And this image is cropped, but it's the shape of a leaf, and it's about 18 inches by 15 inches altogether, and that's going to be stitched onto the banner. Once I have all the pieces from everybody, then the composition will shift with the banner. And these are stills that I've taken from a video from Sarah, who's another collaborator, and she's working with the idea of fish, because when she was thinking about generational knowledge, her childhood memories of fishing with her family came to her, and she's thinking about how as a child she just thought it was ordinary everyday thing, but now she really values that and recognizes that that's a way to carry on the legacy of generational knowledge. The video is really great. I've put in the chat my Instagram and the Facebook page where I have more information about this project, and her videos are there if you want to scroll through and find. She's also a TikTok influencer. And I'm just looking at the chat, and I'm saying hello to everybody, and I'm recognizing Zora from the UK and also Athalie from Surrey, England. Welcome. And Christine is up there too. I see Christine. Hi, Christine. And I saw that Fran was there too on the chat. Sorry if I've missed everybody. I'm just going to keep moving along because I don't want to. Let's go and get through this so we get to the other part. This is the contribution from Christine, and I love this so much. What she's done is she's taken a technique from her mother, who was a seamstress, and in preparing fabric to make garments or anything out of it, the fabric needs to be straightened so that the weave will hang correctly. And to do that, you remove a thread. So Christine took that technique and she removed the threads from these strips of fabric, which were in her kit that I gave to her for the project. And this is I've put them all up on the banner like this. I've just draped them, but as I get all the pieces to the banner, they will be spread out. But the really significant and very moving part of this is, as Christine expressed to me, is that as she was removing the threads, then she had a very visceral experience of and sense of responsibility of how our colonial history has removed what was here before we arrived or before our ancestors arrived. And it was very moving to receive this and to think about the idea of something being removed so that we can see. And then when you can see this in person, you'll see that you can see the green of the banner behind the little bits that have been removed. Let's keep going here. This is a close-up of that. And then there's also, I really like the frayed edge at the end as well. And because I just think it speaks to how our lives, they can fray at the edges, and they can be really beautiful too. Okay, and this is a piece by Fran, and once I get through this presentation, I'm going to ask Fran to speak a little bit about this. I think this is really beautiful and very compelling. These threads here are actually made out of nettle, and the leaves are made out of a SCOBY type substance. I haven't seen this in person yet, and I can't wait to see it in person because I'm just compelled by the visual of this. This looks like skin to me, and I'm really looking forward to hearing a little bit more about this from Fran. And then this is a piece that I've worked on myself. I went into the park, and following Ingrid's lead, I took a roller with me and a little bit of fabric paint and some some oil pastels. And I did a tree rubbing on the maple tree that's in the south end of the park. And I love it because it really captured the bark beautifully. And then, so I've put this up on the banner, and then I've just done some very basic, very simple embroidery. Initially, I was going to cut this into the actual shape of the trunk and the branches, but I thought it was more effective just left as a whole cloth. And and then I'm just giving a suggestion of the branches with the embroidery there. So those are all the pieces that are coming so far. There's more pieces in progress. I'm just going to skip through this. I just want to switch now a little bit into the idea of the bags that we're going to make. And when I realized I wouldn't be able to do this project in person, then I had to come up with a way to bring the project to everybody. And so I was reading about the carrier bag theory of fiction by Ursula K. Le Guin, who I highly recommend. And I ended up making these. It's so funny, this is green, so it's disappearing like a green screen on my image. But I made these to give all the supplies that people would need to work on the project in their own space. So we all worked remotely on that. And then all the bags, they're lined. I just wanted to make them, something nice. I didn't want to deliver them in a hunk of plastic that's going to go to landfill. And also I wanted to gift people something for their efforts for contributing. And they're really simple to make, so I'm excited to show everyone how to do that. And the significance of the bag is Ursula K. Le Guin puts it in her essay that she argues against the idea that the human's first tool was the spear. And she says the first tool would have been a carrier bag. And I love that because it speaks to the idea of care, and it also speaks to the idea of connection. And also I just relate to it as a woman. I just feel like I am a carrier as well. And I think everyone is a carrier, and that we're carrying the knowledge that we've been provided. And those are just some of the items I included in the kits, and they were sent out. There's actually an entire bag right back there of the larger ones. And I used fabrics from around my home. I also purchased fabrics, but this one was a vintage scarf, a vintage silk scarf that I used. I was able to get about three kits out of that fabric. So it was nice instead of just sitting in my fabric stash to get it out. This is one of the beautiful black locust trees in the park. That its bark was very compelling to me. It's so deep and so ridged. I was also taking photographs of my hair at the same time because it was a pandemic and it was feeling self-reflective, but I also noticed I was getting more gray hair. And then when I put the images up side by side, I just loved how the linear pattern is in the tree. It's also in my hair. I think anybody can find this image around their life. So that is it. I'm going to stop sharing this now. And I'm going to open it up to people who are working on the project now. If you're comfortable speaking, just let me know and let the host know, and then we can open the screen for you to speak. I don't want to put anyone on the spot. So got to know Fran that you're here, and Christine, you're here. So if both of you would like to speak, I would love it. If you don't want to speak, that's fine too. And if you do want to speak, just wave or unmute yourself. And yeah, sure. That would be great.
Okay, so I'm Christine, and as Shawn said, I did for my contribution, I decided to pull threads, and it was initially inspired by a chart that I had of the heights of my children as they grew, and family, and then it kind of morphed into, I guess, the lines of trees and the trunks as they grow. And then as I was doing it, it became the idea of removal. So yeah, it's been an interesting journey, and it was a lovely gift to get the bag, and it's something that I know I'll use for a long time. So yeah, I'm just pleased to be part of it, and also to take part in the workshop today.
Thank you so much, Christine.
Hi, this is Fran. I'm visible now. When Shawn was talking about the material I'm working with, I make, I'm an urban beekeeper, and I work with honey in art also, and other high products. I make something that is like kombucha. It's called jun. It's made with honey instead of sugar. And I've been using green tea, but recently I started using nettle leaves, and I was struck by how the scobies used in making the jun are, let's see if I can get this on camera, maybe I can't, there we go. When they're dried, they have a very interesting texture and appearance, and that's what I used for making the leaves. And the nettle is in the SCOBY, but it's also used in the way that I string the leaves together. So there's a SCOBY leaf, and the material that's holding it together and that attaches it to the branchlet is made of nettle. I make a cordage out of the nettle. So I was struck by how bee-like nettles are in their stinging capacity. And I guess I could, I'm still working out how it fits into my settler history. So bringing bees here, which are not indigenous to North America, and whether this is for good or bad, or how they can assist as pollinators and so on. So I'm working all that through still.
Thank you so much, Fran. Okay. All right. Okay, so I know that Zoom communication, it can be really hard on the body and the eyes. So do feel, I'm just going to like stretch for a moment myself. So please feel free to take a stretch if you'd like. And if anybody else would like to make any comments about the project, or I welcome your comments. And otherwise, we'll get moving into making one of the bags, if everyone is ready to move on with that. Okay. Stretch my legs a bit, so that's good. Okay, so I've got here, this is one of the bags that I made that for the kit, and I've actually been using it for my computer. This is kind of this is a wool that I had. I think I got this out of Value Village or the Goodwill, but it's lined with a cotton. This is a cotton that I was using last year, the height of one of the lockdowns that we were in, making PPE, and it was being sent to Northern Community. And inside, this is just a sample. It's just a sample of what would have been sent to people. They would have got a little bit of fabric to work with. Oops, I'm not sure what happened there. Oh, sorry. It says that my battery is low on my phone. I'm just going to get my charger. It was at 91. I thought it would last the whole way, but sure that's okay. Sorry about this. Sorry, I'm just gonna have to move my phone while I fix this. Oh dear. Well, we got a longer break than I initially planned, but that's okay. Okay, now we're good to go. Okay, so I had just sent out the kits to people, and I gave a little diagram of a sense of what the banner would look like, and a little instruction about the theme that it was all about, and a little template of just to give a sense of scale, and then also just using the tree as a symbol of generational knowledge. And I really love the bag, and especially when I started reading Ursula Franklin's idea about the carrier bag. And so I started making a bunch of them, and I wanted to make one today for my laptop, actually. So this is a sample of one. And then here's another sample of one that I used from, I had this fabric that I got out of a thrift store, which I thought was nice, and I loved it with this project too because it's green and it's got foliage in it. The same thing. This is, it's got fabric in it. It's got a little pouch inside of it as well with some tools, and then actually another little pouch too that I had made for drawing tools. Okay, so now I'm not sure if everyone actually read the things that you need or not, but I hope that you have the supplies. And if not, you will get a recording of this video, I believe, too, or a link to it, so that you can check the how to make this. So what you'll do is you'll get you 2 pieces of fabric. One is your outer piece and one is your lining. I have this nice gray twill, and I bought this in the summertime. I was a bit ambitious. I was going to make myself a jean jacket and so on, but I just got busy and I didn't get to it. And then I did find this nice, this floral at a thrift store again, once the pandemic had opened. So what I've done is I've cut out 2 pieces. that or it's double the size that I want for my bag. And you could actually cut 4 pieces as well, just cut that down the middle. But I find this way there's one less row of stitching. And what I've done is I have sandwiched a zipper into the in between the 2 pieces of fabric. So I've taken the right side of my gray twill and I have put my zipper against the edge, and you'll see that my zipper is longer than my fabric, the short end of my fabric, and that's fine. I'll trim that down after. And then you take the right side of your lining fabric and you're going to sandwich the zipper, and you're going to put the so you have your outer fabric with its right side to the face of the zipper, and then you have the right side of your lining fabric to the back of the zipper, and you just line it up. If you have a sewing machine, you can just go ahead and stitch it, but we're going to do this slow stitching and do it by hand. I had prepared this before the workshop, so I put these pins in place so that we can go ahead and stitch. And I have these threads here. I've chosen purple thread because it's my favorite color, and also it would provide a good contrast to do the stitching. So there's 3 stitches that I'm going to talk about here. There's the running stitch, which is just down into the fabric and out, and there's a back stitch, which will be a stronger stitch, and it's also mimics a sewing machine stitch, so that you have a really strong stitch at the end. And then there's another stitch called a whip stitch, and that's for closing up an opening in a row of seaming that's and you can do that invisibly. So what I'll do first is I'm just going to go ahead and put a running stitch in here just to base it. So at the end of my fabric, the end of my thread, there is a knot. I don't know if you can see that. And I'm just going to quickly go just about a 1/4 of an inch from the edge of the sandwiched fabrics and zipper. And at this point, if people would like to unmute and chat, please feel free, because I would love to hear your thoughts. And I don't need to be the only one speaking in the workshop. Okay, so I'm just doing this. Often this is something that a step that I would just skip, because you can just do this so quickly on a sewing machine. You can, but anyway, just to hold it into place and to make sure it looks nice, I just do this running stitch. And you can use recycled fabrics. So, if they're wrinkly, you can just give them a press before you start. It's easier to work with. And you can purchase fabrics at secondhand stores, or you can go. Fabrics are getting more and more costly because of the all the resources required for them to get them through the mills and whatnot. And the one thing that I always mention about this project is the use of the fabric. Although I don't delve into it, I am aware that the whole process of colonization is really significant in the production of fabric, with the fabrics coming from India or Bangladesh or China, where labor laws, it's not even the labor laws, it's just the fashion industry, the whole textile industry is really hard on the earth, and it's really hard on people. Okay, so I've stitched that in, or I basted it in, and then and there we have the beginning of our bag. And then what you would do is you would go and do the back stitch on top of that, and it's going to stay nicely in place because it's been basted. But as I said before, you can skip that step if you want to. Just go ahead. But I just wanted to show you how to do that. Very basic step. And this back stitch I'm going to show you now. So I just knotted my thread. I'm going to start at the edge here. And in this instance, because I'm doing it by hand, I'm not so concerned about getting as close to the teeth of the zipper as possible, but you can do that with a zipper foot if you're doing this on machine. So what I like to do is I just start by anchoring the thread into the fabrics, and I just do that by stitching 3 tiny stitches in the same spot. And then you just get into a little rhythm of going 1 step forward and then 1 step back. So you can see this. So I'm going to go down that, and I'll move along to the front, and then I'm going to back stitch to where my needle went in first. So I'll go down, and then I can pull it all the way through, or I just move it through and move it ahead about 1/4 of an inch or so from where the thread went in previously, and then you come forward, and then you just get into this pattern. So. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. And it's nice to slow down, take a break from the world and do this. I find it quite meditative. Everyone has a different skill level and also different tolerances for neatness. I love something that's made very well, and but I know that I can be impatient by nature, so I know that I don't necessarily get everything exactly perfectly measured, but I still like it to be strong and to function. So you can see how it makes a straight line, or not straight, but as straight as I can make it. And then on the other side, you can see that it's also being stitched. And then we've got the basting. I can leave the basting in or take it out after. I'm also making this back stitch row just on the inside of that basting stitch. And I pull it top, but not too firm, so you want some flexibility in there. I started sewing when I was 14. And the reason I started sewing is I discovered that I could actually make things for myself that fit properly, because I was always really tiny and could never buy things that actually fit. And then also my family wasn't very wealthy, so I'd always get my brother's hand-me-down clothes, and then I discovered I could just make my own. And also I really loved how to take you know, a flat piece of fabric and turn it into something three-dimensional. I love that idea of transforming something, which I still find inspiring, the idea of things that transform. And I'm hoping some, you know, that comes through on the project as well, is that everybody working together, maybe we'll have some sort of transformation of things. So I'm getting near to the end of the thread here. So I'm going to anchor my stitching the same way. I just do 3 little stitches. That's what my mom taught me. And I'll just snip it and start again. It's interesting when I was starting this project, and you know, I put the call out for people to work on it, and often people felt quite intimidated once they learned it was fabric and stitching, and they were really worried that, especially the men, they were worried that they couldn't do it because it was sewing. So I ended up having to recruit like a few men to work on the project to get over that, you know, the intimidation of working with cloth. I don't know what everyone's skill level is on this workshop, so feel free to share any ideas you have or any tips that you have on what you think is useful to know about this. And often when people do hand stitching, when people will want to double up the thread, but it's really not necessary. The thread is quite strong. Some people will wax the thread, especially if you're doing buttonholes or sewing buttons on. Waxing the thread just helps it not get stuck in knots, and it makes it smoother to work with. I'm just coming up to the end here. The nice thing about this pattern, it's so simple. It's just 2 rectangles. You can make it any size that you want. And if your zipper is larger, you can cut the zipper down to make it fit, and then you can make these as small or as big as you want. And then when I did the smallest ones, I didn't use a zipper. I just used a little tie as a closure, and that took me several times to figure out the best way to get that. So the first people who got the kits kind of have my test runs. Okay, I'm just right at the end here, so I'm just going to the end of the thread and the end of the the fabric. So I'm just doing my 3 little stitches here to secure it, which is equivalent to the back stitch if you're sewing on a machine. And there. So now I have that stitched in. I'm going to take the basting out. Okay, and there we have the first side of the zipper stitched in place. And then we open it up. And the right side of the zipper is on the right side of the outer fabric. And you can just test, and oh, I should have tested this before I started, but you just want to make sure your zipper actually works as well. This is a vintage zipper, so I really should have checked it to make sure that it was working just fine. Okay, so then I'm going to repeat that process on the other side. And to do this will be a little bit tricky to show you, but it's hard to see on the table here, but here is the zipper. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold up the lining. So I've got the other end of the lining, and I'm going to match that, and just going to match up the edge of the first part that we did, and I'm going to pin it in place. If I was using industrial techniques, I would not be using pins. I would just like hold it in place and stitch it. But I'm definitely not using an industrial technique right now. This is just simply hands-on. Oh, that's great. I'm just looking at the notes. Someone in the chat, someone is taking notes. That's really nice. Thank you. Okay, and then so I flipped it over, and now I'm going to pull up the gray twill fabric, and I'm matching the right side to the right side of the zipper, and I'm going to line up the edge of the twill as well. So I'm just doing exactly what I did with the first side, and I'm just sandwiching the zipper into place. When I was making these for the project, I got into a routine, and I was doing it a little bit production style, just to move through them quickly, because I ended up making 28 kits altogether. But I'm going to go slower mode with this. So I've got that pinned into place, as you can see. So here is the twill side. There is the lining side. It's going to open up like this. And at this point, I don't need to keep the zipper open, but after I stitch this into place, I will definitely find the inside and open it before I continue, so that I don't get a bag that I can't use at all. And I'm not going to baste this one because I just wanted to show you that basting stitch at first. This one, I'm just going to jump right into the back stitch. And I'm going to stitch on the twill side, but it really doesn't matter which one you do, just as long as it's secure. So I'm anchoring the stitching. And I can feel the teeth right there of the zipper. So I don't want to get too close to it, but it doesn't really matter. Like if you get too close to it, then the fabric could get stuck into it. That's the drawback. Okay, so I've got this started. I always, I have to take a moment to think about just getting started until I have the rhythm down. So I'm going to poke up about 1/4 of an inch from the previous stitch. I come up through, and then I go back to where that stitch is, and then move it through. So even though it is 1/4 of an inch, about 1/4 of an inch or so, on the underside of the stitch, I'm actually, putting the needle through, and it's actually more like 1/2 an inch because it's taking the 1/4 inch on this side of the first stitch and then 1/4 inch on the other side. I hope that makes sense. And this is a bigger needle than the last one I was using, so it's actually, I find it easier. There's just more leverage to get through the 3 layers, the twill, the zipper, and the lining. Oops. And then you can just turn it over and make sure you're catching everything as well. This just came undone. The thread is, oops. My site is not what it used to be. And I'm going to anchor it and start with a new thread because this is quite short. And just take an arm's length. If you go longer than an arm's length, the thread can tangle, and that can be very frustrating. Oops. And I do have a needle threader somewhere here too. Actually, I have a pack of them, which are really handy to have. Often I can't see properly to get the needle and the thread working together. Okay, so I'm going to start again. I'm going to put the needle through where my last stitch was, and I'm just going to go a 1/4 of an inch for the first one. And I actually will anchor this too. And then let's go through like 1/2 an inch through the bottom, up and through. I'll try to get through this quickly. And because this seam is going to be enclosed, there's no need to finish the seam. If it's a fabric that really frays, you might want to.
do a zigzag stitch, but you don't need to finish it because it's all going to be enclosed. And so you can see I'm just getting a little impatient, so I'm not doing exactly 1/4 of an inch. But I really should be doing 1/4 of an inch. Pins out of the way. And by doing this back stitching, what you're doing is you're mimicking the sewing machine of the upper and the lower threads, but make that chain stitch with the fabric in between. And just coming to the end of the thread again, so I'm just going to anchor it. And when you buy thread, it's always good to get better quality thread if you can. I like to get the Gutermann threads when I can, just because they're better quality and they last longer. They usually will outlast your garment or item that you're making. Okay, so, oops. There's a little bit more to go here. Moving the pin out of the way. And there's a new sewing gadget you can get. They're little clips, which are great that you can use instead of pins. I don't actually have any, but I've seen them and they are, they look really handy. Sometimes you'll notice, like, if your fabrics don't line up at the end, don't worry about it, especially on something like this. It's not going to matter. But if you're making a garment and you found that your fabric, before you cut your fabric, if you find that it's not lining up straight, what you can do is you can pull the fabric on the bias, so on the diagonal, because the fabrics often in shipping, or when they're being wound on the bolts, they will, the fibers will actually get pulled out of shape. And then even though you've measured it correctly, you lay out your fabric and like one side is wonky. But if you just take your fabric and you stretch it, say if I hadn't stitched on this, you would just like stretch it on the diagonal like that, and again like this way, and then it will help get the fibers back all in alignment again. Okay, so here we have now, we have the lining and we have the outer fabric, and they're connected with the zipper. So I'm going to unzip it now and turn it around. Take a look at it. Oops, there's a pin in there I missed. I'll take that out. That's a nice thing about using the clips, is you don't get poked if you forget one. And I forgot two. And so the nice thing about this is you can have fun as well with the design element. So this, like if I'm on the subway, you know, this is just going to look very utilitarian. It's neutral gray, and I did select a black zipper, so it'll just look very neutral. But then when you open it up, you've got your nice lining inside. So I'm just going to test and make sure the zipper is working smoothly, and it is. And there you go. Oops. So I'm going to zip it. And that's the beginning of the of my computer bag. And actually, the nice thing I didn't think about, my computer is silver, so this actually will kind of look nice with it. The next step is we're going to secure the side seams, and then it'll be finished. But before that, there's a couple of things you can do if you want. You can take it and you can press it out at this point. It's always good to press your work as you sew, because just makes your work look more professional. It looks more neat. You know, it just gives your work a nice polished look to it. What you can do is, if you're doing this by machine, you can also do an edge after you've pressed it. You can do edge of top stitching so that the fabric doesn't shift and then get caught in the zipper during use. And so if you press it, you can just go through. Doing by hand, we could go through and do a running stitch on here just to keep the fabrics out of the way of the teeth of the zipper. Okay, so now I'm going to put this inside out again and show you how to do the side seams. And then you can also just like trim up any threads you want to get rid of. Okay, so it's really important that you do have the zipper open at least part of the way, so that you can flip it when you're done. And you're going to leave a little opening in one of the side seams in the lining. But before we get to that, you get to where your zipper is, and you're going to find where the little, these little nibs are, if you can see it or not, but there's little silver nibs. Sorry, find that under there. So I'm going to match up these little nibs, and I'm going to press the teeth together, and I'm going to press them towards the lining. That's very important, because you want the zipper to go towards the lining so it looks nicer, and it'll be smoother when you use it. And if you're worried about it, like mine is not lined up perfectly, so just to make sure I don't have any little weird tucks, I'm going to close the zipper. Just, and there, and now it's lined up more, it's lined up better. Okay. So that tells me there's probably still a little bit of a twist in this twill, which is fine. So now I'm going to press the teeth towards the lining. And I'm going to pin that in place. I'm going to go back and open the zipper after. And if I was using the sewing machine, I would just do a straight stitch all the way along, and that would be done. So there we go. And then you can choose where you want to leave an opening so that you can put your hand in later and to pull the bag right side out. Just as, like, you know, about 3 to 5 inches, whatever you can get your hand through. And I like to leave it in the middle of the side in the lining, because then it's just very inconspicuous when you go to stitch it up after. So what I'll do is I'll start from the bottom of the lining, and I'm going to quickly stitch it using the back stitch, and again anchor it. Oops. It's just wrapped around the edge of there. Okay. And so after going through the 3 layers, the zipper, the twill, and the cotton, this feels very light. It's just the lining. And the reason I like to go in the middle, to leave the opening in the middle, is just so that when I turn this out, right side out, it just leaves a nicer corner if it's already stitched. But you could start here and work your way up. It wouldn't really matter. It's just a personal preference. And that's fine. I'm going to anchor it right here. And there's not too much thread on here, so I'm just going to rethread another needle. And the light is changing because it's 4:17, so it's getting to be dark already. And then I usually stitch, I aim for 1/2 inch seam allowance when I'm stitching the side seams. And 1/2 inch is often like the width of your thumb or a little bit less. And if you wanted to be very precise, you could draw a line as well. So I know precision is often really important to a lot of people, and and it's definitely achievable. But I prefer just to go quick and fast. And so I'm nearing the zipper, and let's see if I can show it to you. Like the seam allowances for the lining go toward the outer fabric, but the teeth of the zipper go toward the lining. And as I go over the zipper, I am being careful about where those little metal prongs are. Because I don't want to stitch right into them. It would break a needle, especially on a sewing machine. Oops. But even, I think I'm actually hitting that. So I'm just going to move my needle a bit over to go around that bit. And I'm also making my stitches a little bit smaller here. And I do want to be actually pretty careful here. I might come back and reinforce that, just so that it doesn't fall apart on me when I'm using the bag. And I can see that I've missed some there, so I'm definitely going to come back and reinforce that. And then it's also good to turn it over just in case the fabric's not lined up perfectly. You want to make sure you're catching both sides of the fabric. I'm just coming to the end of my thread, so I'm just going to reinforce again, anchor. Oops. I think that was just 2, but that's okay because I'm going to be anchoring a new thread on top of it. So we'll get anchored. One time when I was traveling, when I was a young woman, I was traveling and I found this great fabric
was white and this big turquoise floral pattern on it. And had seen somebody wearing these wraparound pants in Spain. And I thought they were so great that this is the sewing technique I used I decided to make a pair. And I used, because I was traveling, obviously didn't have my sewing machine. I ended up using this stitch to make those wraparound pants. Another time I was sewing a baby carrier for my daughter, and I didn't have a sewing machine. Actually, I did have a sewing machine, but I didn't have an iron. So remember, I did a lot of top stitching in lieu of ironing. But in this instance, we would do, like, because I didn't heat up the iron for this project, just finger pressing is fine for something like this. It's totally fine to innovate. And I love it when people who don't know how to sew, and then they'll start stitching and they come up with new ways of doing things, which is great. Which is why I encourage people who don't know how to sew just to pick up the tools and just give it a go, what makes sense to you. And then if you're interested, you'll seek out the techniques as well and do a hybrid of something. Oops, I lost my thread. And next week, when we do part 2, I want to do some appliqué, because that's another thing that'll be happening with the banner. Is I have these ginormous chestnut leaves that fell in the part, or clusters of the leaves. There's 7 leaves on one cluster. I have it up in my studio, and with that, I'm making a leaf pattern that I want to put on the banner, and I intend to appliqué the leaves on. So that's what we're going to do next week, is appliqué. But if you did want to embroider or decorate your bag, well, especially if you wanted to embroider it, it's good to leave a piece of it open so that you can actually just work on the one outer side and not both the lining and the outer piece. But when I was making these, I wasn't decorating them. I was just relying on the fabrics themselves as the decoration, as the design element. I'm just going to anchor this again. So I'm coming to the end of the gray twill. And I'm just going to anchor right on the edge. The 3 tiny stitches in a row. And then I'm going to go back to the zipper because I know it needs to be reinforced. And I'm actually going to work from the other side. part of the reason it's difficult for me is just because there's a lot of layers of fabric there, plus the zipper. So it's quite stiff to get through. There we go. And anchor that into place. You can just trim up any threads. And I'm just going to go in and open the zipper before I forget. And I'll turn it inside out so you can see it. And just poke the corners out. I'm going to go and trim the corners as well, so there's less bulk. But I just want to make sure that it's going to look okay and function. I mean, mainly functioning is the most important thing. And the twill is much stiffer. There you can see, get a sense of what it's going to be like. So that. I think this definitely needs to be stitched down, so I'm going to go in and do that after. I don't think I'll have time to do it on today's workshop, but I will go and do that. Okay, so I think that's all right. I'm going to turn this back inside out with the zipper open. And very carefully, I'm going to trim the corners. If this was machine stitched, I would trim pretty close to the stitching, but because it's hand stitched, I'm going to leave about 1/8 of an inch between the stitching and where I'm cutting, and I'm cutting on an angle. I'm going to cut just like an angle right along there. I hope you saw that. So just a little trim. And actually, I noticed that I don't think I've stitched it well enough right on the lining part. I'm just going to reinforce it before I cut it. Even though it's on the inside, I still wouldn't want it falling apart. So let's think of that. And then just trim. And I do want to trim where the zipper is as well. And I go on an angle very carefully so that I don't catch any of the fabric unintentionally. And it's mainly the teeth part of the zipper. I'm just going to go in a very slight angle to reduce that bulk. And then on this side as well, just very carefully. And I'm going to double check the zipper's open. And then I'm going to repeat the process. So you'll notice that my zipper is longer than my bag, and that's totally fine. I'm going to fold the zipper over so the teeth go toward the lining, and the zipper tape goes toward the outer fabric. And you just want to make sure that it's lying nice and flat. I'm going to cut the zipper afterwards. I could cut it now, but it's just always safer to do it after the stitching is done. And I'm going to pin this into place. Don't need a whole lot of pins. So we're just going to whip through this. And on this side, we don't need to stop and start with a hole because we've already got the hole on the other side. We're going to use to turn the bag inside out. Or right side out, I mean. Okay, so, okay. So here we go again with our back stitch. So at 1/2 inch seam allowance, we're just going to quickly anchor. And then we just start this back stitch. You know, I just, what happens when I'm doing this work is that my mind will, once I get into the groove of doing the work, then what I really enjoy about it is then I can start thinking about things when I don't have time to think about things. And so it just occurred to me now when I gave the land acknowledgement at the beginning of the workshop, and I just talked briefly about the fact that I live and work on land that's been occupied for, well, since time immemorial. But what I forgot to mention, and I apologize, is that the whole reason for doing the land acknowledgement is not a performative thing to do, but it is a true acknowledgement. And what I like to acknowledge, or what I need to acknowledge, is that I benefit by living here and working here. And so that just came to me now. I forgot to mention that when I gave the acknowledgement. And I benefit by having the, you know, the privilege of living here. And benefit from all the resources that the land and the water offers. And then also there's a lot of traditional knowledge that I'm very fortunate to have learned through the Indigenous community in Toronto and through my family. And it even goes back to the fabric as well, just acknowledging who is processing the fabric and making the fabric available. I think probably any industry we can recognize the politics and the social orders that really structure the benefits for some people and not for other people. Oops. Sometimes this happens, the thread will just entangle a bit. If I start moving too fast, then it happens there. Okay. I'm coming to the end and near the end of my thread, so I'm going to anchor it because I definitely don't want to be at the zipper when it's right at the end. Let's try it on there. Okay. And if anybody would be interested in adding something to the banner, please feel free to contact me if that is something that interests you. The banner will be exhibited as part of my thesis exhibition in April. And hopefully the pandemic restrictions will have lifted somewhat, and people will be able to attend the exhibit in person. What it's going to consist of is the banner will be strung or hung from the ceiling in a circular fashion. And I've been documenting everything that I've been making for the banner and my research process, and a video will be made from those clips and stills and from posts online, and that will accompany the banner in the exhibition space at York University. So I'm really looking forward to that. And I'll also have some of the kits there in the space, and hopefully people will be able to come in, pandemic pending, and stitch right in the gallery and add right to the banner on the spot so that it becomes a living banner. And then people will be able to use the banner after if they want to take it to a protest or to an event and people will be able to use their kits. I do call these meditation kits too, because I was visiting my grandson, and he pulled out his drawing kit, and he called it, he said to me, "I'm going to go get my meditation kit." And I said, "What? What is that?" And he brought it over, and it was his drawing kit. I was so impressed that he called it a meditation kit that I decided to call the kits here meditation kits as well. He's 6 years old, so I thought that was like, he has a very brilliant mind. And I love that he's has the sensitivity and the wherewithal to realize that having a meditation kit is a good thing. To have a time out to think about things, or just to gather one's, or just get grounded, I guess. Another fun part of this is I was at the beach with my granddaughter, and this is when the lockdowns had lifted, and she's 3, and we were putting the towels on the sand, and everyone had their own towel, and she looks at the towels and she says, "We are all a piece of the puzzle." And I thought it was just so profound and poignant. So that I'm going to include in my thesis essay as well at some point, maybe as a quote. But I love that the generational knowledge can go and doesn't have to go in the timeline that we experience. It can go in both directions from different generations.
That's a beautiful story. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you. You're welcome. Oops. Oh, you can tell it's getting darker because the darker it gets, the longer it takes me to thread a needle. There, got it.
Can I ask, for those of us who are abroad, is there a way that we can see the banner online?
Oh, yes. If you go to my Instagram, the address is at the top of the chat. Okay. I believe there is a video of it in progress. I don't have a picture or a video of it yet with all the additions, but I will be posting it on my Instagram.
Okay, got that. Thank you.
Yeah. The reason I did a banner too is was the 2000s that we did one of the iterations of the Buffalo Jump Ahead using a banner. But I also when my children became teenagers, I was a single mom, and I realized at that time, I was so excited that they were teenagers. I thought, yay, I'll have time again for myself. But I was really surprised that I actually needed a stronger presence in the home. And so I ended up starting a business from home, so that way I could be at the home and still generate an income. And I ended up making cloth banners, which is, why I think that's why I just gravitated toward making a banner for this, for my thesis. Okay, so now I've got the other side stitched together, And I'm going to just quickly trim the edges here. And I'm going to cut the zipper off. Pin there, just tried to cut a pin with these scissors, that was terrible. Okay, there we go. And I'm going to trim the edge. And I'm going to quickly turn this inside out using the hole that I left. And I'm going to pull the right side through the hole. Oopsies. And I'm going to put my hand in through the hole and I'm going to push out the corners so that they look nice. And the other corner. There's the hole. I actually tore that by accident as I was flipping the fabric through, just because I noticed the time, we're almost at the close. But I'll fix that. I'm going to stuff the lining inside, give it a shake. And I'm pressing the inside of the lining into the corner of the outer fabric. And very carefully at the zipper as well. And there. So if we were to do this on machine, it would take like 20 minutes to do the stitching part. It takes longer to do the measuring and whatnot, but there it is. And there's the inside. And what I'm quickly going to do is pull out the side with the hole and do the whip stitch. And this is really simple to do. You just take it, just line it up. I'm going to put one pin in the middle. For this, typically I would use a thread that was more closer in color to the lining, but just so that you can see it, hopefully you can see it, I'm going to do the whip stitch. And I'm just going to, this part that, well, so clearly my anchor didn't anchor like I was intending. So I'm going to go a few stitches down. I'm going to put the needle down inside that line, and I'm just going to like whip around the seam. I'll try to get closer to the camera so you can see. Stand up. So I'll just quickly anchor. And then you just, it's basically a running stitch, but instead of going up and down through the fabric, you're just going to go up and down around the edge of the fabric. And the smaller the stitches, the stronger it will be. I'm going to do this just very quickly though. If the fabric was a little thinner, I would be able to like load up the stitches, but I just can't quite do it. It's fabric is a fairly thick cotton. Okay, there we go.
Just anchor that. And we're done. So we'll just pop that in. And oh, well, you know, I'm not quite done. I lied. I do want to go back and do a little hand top stitch just to make sure that the fabric doesn't get caught in the zipper. But there we go. Is a nice little bag. Oops. That could be nicer, but that's okay. And then that's how you do the bags. They're really simple to do, and then people love it when they receive these as gifts, and they go, "Oh, it's lined." And it's the nice thing about lining it is that you don't have to finish the seam allowances inside. I find it easier to make a lined bag than an unlined bag. And then you have something that's a bit stronger too. I'm going to get one of my other computers and see if it fits. Of course, I should have done that from the get-go, but yeah, it's going to fit just nicely in there. Anyway, my new computer is a little bit smaller than this. But anyway, that's what it's going to be used for, for holding my other computer. Okay. Does anybody have any comments? I'm reading the comments in the chat. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been great.
Thank you.
I hope I can remember, and I'll watch the video after as well.
Great-o. Thank you so much.
I've stitched my zipper. I'm just doing the second side now, so I have a fair way to go.
Okay.
But thank you. I've really enjoyed this. I look forward to the next session. Really appreciate this class.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And who is that speaking?
That was Zohra from the UK.
Oh, Zohra. Thank you so much.
Should we try to complete these bags before the next session? Should we try and will we get the video so we can follow along? Because I didn't quite catch the closing.
Okay.
Stitching the sides.
I think the video will be available later. But don't worry. The one thing I've said to everyone who's collaborating on the project is please don't stress, because the whole premise of the project is to find care in our lives. So I don't want anyone to stress. The advantage to not finishing it is that if you want to stitch an appliqué on the bag itself, if it's open still, it will be easier to do that.
All right. Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. Hello, everybody. And feel free to activate your videos. And once we get going, feel free also to unmute yourself so that you may ask questions or make comments. I'm hoping this will be conversational. So what I'd like to do first is start with a very brief land acknowledgement. I'd like to acknowledge that I live and work on Te Toronto. It's part of the traditional territories of the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, and the Haudenosaunee and Wendat peoples. Toronto is part of Treaty 13, which also falls under the centuries-old covenant dish with one spoon. That was a treaty agreement between the Anishinaabe and Mississaugas and the Haudenosaunee. And the dish with one spoon, the way it was taught to me is that it means that there's one dish meaning like the resources of the Great Lake Basin area, and 1 spoon. And so that means that it's really important to take what you need, but not more than what you need, and that to be recognize that we share the resources, we share this area with everybody. So what I'd like to do is just follow up from last week, and thank you so much everybody for attending last week and attending this week. What we did was we made, and I didn't see everybody's because I had my screen on speaker instead of gallery, but feel free to show, if you have your product, feel free to show what you made. We made these little bags, these lined, zippered carrier bags, and or we started making them. And so I'm very curious how people did, and if you have any questions, just type it in to the comments. And I see hi Sky and hi Zora. Zora, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. And what I wanted to move on to today, if people didn't have any questions about the bag itself, is I wanted to move on to a little bit of embroidery and appliqué techniques that we can use for the banner, or the banner, your bags. I said banner because I just wanted to let you know that I did bring the banner down from the studio because we're very likely going to be in lockdown soon. So I went and got everything from my studio so that I could also work from home. So I can just tell you a little bit about this banner. It's part of my MFA project called When Nobody Was Here. And I think everyone here knows the story behind that. Anyway, this was one of the first contributions. Is a friend of mine, Ingrid, who's a printmaker and a ceramicist. She put these little prints on using a lino cut technique, and she put the lino cut behind the fabric and then loaded her roller with ink designed for fabric, and then just rolled the images on. And so these are all images, and she was thinking about the idea of migration and how some creatures, flora and fauna, are present here in Toronto in this area, but they're also present in other parts of the world. And just thinking about the ways that they've also traveled here, either naturally with birds and animals, but then also through colonization. So that was the first thing. This banner is 45 feet long, so I'm not going to be able to hold the whole thing up, but that's one end of it. And the other end I'm working on. And so this drapes down on the floor behind me. And here is a piece. If I can hold this up in a way you can see it. So what I've done here, let's see. It's hard to see because okay. So what I did is I took the darker piece of fabric, and I took it out to the park, my local park, and I did a tree rubbing with it using oil pastel. And I also had a roller with some fabric ink and our fabric pigment, and I rolled it onto the fabric against the surface of the tree to get the I don't know if you can see it there, just to get the texture of the bark. And then I've attached that to the banner, and I left it whole. And I started embroidering lines to give the suggestion of the maple tree that this actually is. So that was one thing I wanted to do today, was just show a little bit about that embroidery. So I put some of it into a hook so we can embroider that. And I'm not an expert at embroidery at all. And so one thing about my project is I've asked people to join, and often people were worried that they didn't have enough skills, but I think it's really fun to learn new skills, and it's just part of lifelong learning. We can always just pick up something and learn something new. I remember trying to embroider when I was a little child and having great difficulty with it because the line, all the threads would get tangled and whatnot. So it's much easier now. If you have an embroidery hoop, that really helps. I found it difficult to get the fabric in here taut just because of the bulk of the fabric, and it kept sliding off the table. But I was so lucky to attend an embroidery workshop a couple of weekends ago, and there was an expert embroiderer there, and so she was talking about how it's important to get the surface tight if you can, and if you want a really neat and precise end product, you go by the fibers, you count the fibers when you're making your stitches, and that way you can keep everything very consistent. And on this, oh, thank you. Oh, thank you. I'm just reading the comments here. This is so strange with Zoom. So I'm just talking, and then I'm looking at the comments. So Sherry is asking me to summarize the background. And Zara says, it's beautiful, thank you. And I'm realizing, I guess everyone can see those comments as well. So I'll just jump back to summarize the project. So Sherry, when I made my application for the MFA, I really wanted to pick up on a project that I had done years ago, decades ago, actually. And that was a project called Buffalo Jump Ahead, and that was a piece of processional art. And the way that this started was when my daughter, Sage, was in, I think, grade 2 or 3 at elementary school. She was learning about the pioneers in Canada. And the way that it was taught in the school was that it was when nobody was here. And so that's where I take my title from the project from, is when my daughter skipped home from school and said, when nobody was here. So my children are Indigenous children. Their dad is from Pachinak. It's in northern Saskatchewan, part of the Dene Nation. And in that classroom, most of the children actually were Indigenous. So it seemed really quite appalling that somebody would stand in front of the classroom and say that there was a time when nobody was here. And that was my first experience of witnessing and hearing about and seeing through my daughter's eyes a moment of a cultural erasure, a historical erasure. By saying when nobody was here, it just assumed or asserted that there was no history here before, or no human history here before the contact and colonization happened on southern Ontario. So we went to the school and to address it, and we ended up doing the project called Buffalo Jump Ahead, where we conducted a series of workshops in the community, and we had storytellers and drummers and singers, and we went with the story Buffalo Jump Ahead because our storyteller was from Alberta, and that was one of the stories that she was allowed to tell. And so she talked about the story of the Buffalo Jump, and we thought it was quite significant because of the demise of the buffalo, and that speaks to the process of colonization. So we ended up making 4 life-size buffalo puppets at these workshops. And then after some weeks, then we held a procession at the Scarborough Bluffs, and we marched the 4 buffaloes puppets down the street. We had people dressed up as and walking on stilts and representing all the elements of fire, especially. And then when we got to the bluffs, then the storyteller spoke, and we had a feast, and there was drumming, and it was quite a beautiful celebration of our presence. And it was significant because we were able to address the omission in the school curriculum. And as a result of that, that curriculum changed, and we were also able to get Indigenous language put into the curriculum, not as an extracurricular, but right into the curriculum. And so that continues today at that school. and also into the high schools that the children then continue on into. So it was really significant. At the moment when, and I had just had my third daughter, Sky, who was 2 weeks old at the time when we had the procession. And so I was carrying her in the infant carrier, and I made a cape for myself, and I had printed the buffalo hoofs on the cape. It was just this old fabric I had. And I did that just to speak to the demise of the buffalo, as I mentioned earlier, and where my history and the history of my ancestors collides with the natural history of North America, Ontario, and I'm from British Columbia as well. And just how everybody does have a voice, and that we can find a way to make sure that all the voices are heard. So that project continued for several years, 13 years actually. And it was 2006, 2007. I kind of forget the years specifically, but I was making banners as my income. I was just running a company from my home, and I was making cloth banners. And so I was invited to make a banner for this new iteration of the Buffalo Jump, and it actually had changed its name to Unity Walk, and it always coincided on June 21st, which is First Nations Day in Canada. And so we made this long banner, and it had a creation story on it, and we took it on a procession on Queen Street West in Toronto, and took it to Trinity Bellwoods Park. And there the banner was put on. This was a red banner, and it was put onto a wooden carousel, and then it orbited. And so it was this beautiful red banner, and it was orbiting in the park. It just looked like a jewel in my eyes, and I've always wanted to work with something like that. So when it came to I finally finished off my BFA in 2019, and I applied for my MFA, and I decided that I wanted to continue with this idea of working with people of a visual arts practice that is experiential. And I wanted to create a new banner and continue the conversation that started for me in 1993. But obviously that conversation is much older and much bigger than me. It's bigger than my family. And it's been going on for like some 350 years. And that's about how we can all live together, and how well, it might seem ideal, but also just how we can live equitably together. So that's the background of the project and why I'm working on this big banner. And I just put an open call out. Of course, this all happened with COVID too. So I had wanted to work on this in the park, and I couldn't take people into the park. I was hoping to there we had a couple of weeks, a month or so. I thought, oh good, when the lockdowns were lifted, I thought, oh good, we'll go to the park, we'll stay socially distanced, it should all be fine. But the ethics committee at my university was not able to approve that. So I had to do everything by remote instead. And what I ended up doing was making kits for everybody. And I made these little cloth bags, and I filled it with fabrics and little smaller cloth bags like this, with all the tools inside that people would need to make something for the project. And so I made 28 kits altogether, and I've got about 12 to 15 or so people are actually making things to be added to the banner. And so it's really quite exciting. I'm really loving the process. It involves trust because I hand the materials over. We had some Zoom meetings. We talked about the topics, and then I just leave it in people's hands to see what they come up with. And so Ingrid did these
I've gotten some pieces that are coming back. Here's one here. I have not attached it yet, but it's an artist who made this, and he took copies of a book cover of the history of York, which Toronto used to be called York, from the 1800s. It's a really racist book. It's the framework is really racist, and but he's taken the cover of it and used a heat transfer method to put it on, which is kind of cool. It looks a little bit like skin. And then these postcards, you can see this here, from also, well, they think this actually was from the early 1900s from High Park. So that's kind of west of where I'm at in the city. And he put that all together. I will attach this to the banner. And then another piece that's going to go on it is, I found this garment in a thrift store, and not being Catholic, I didn't recognize what it is. And initially this was like an ivory color, but you'll see that, and I'll put this right under, it's got Latin words embroidered right into the netting that it's made out of. So it's a religious garment. And some people had borrowed this from me over the years. And then a friend of mine who borrowed it said, "Oh, I've got your gown, I'll bring it back to you." At that point, everything was breaking out in the news about the children's bodies being recovered from the Indian residential schools. So there was these mass graves, and well, not so much that they were mass graves, but they were unmarked graves. And so when I got this, and in the news was, all these bodies, and I think the count now is over 7,000 remains of children have been recovered or have been found. Haven't all been recovered yet, but I think they're still in the ground. But all these missing children's bodies were being found, and the number continues to grow. And so I find it very intense and very unsettling to have this garment from the Christian church. And I felt very uncomfortable working with it. So I dyed the garment just to give it some sort of transformation, just physically, so that I'd feel more comfortable working with it. And now I'm in the process of deconstructing it. It's been very well made. This was probably made in the 50s, I figured. The dye that I dyed it didn't really take so well, so that tells me that there's probably, I used a dye for synthetic fabric, but since it didn't really take all that well, there's probably a mixture of synthetic and natural fibers in this. But what I'm doing is I'm taking the stitching apart. I'm going to make one of the kits with it, and then also I'm going to take parts of the embroidery and work it into the fabric, into the banner. There's another piece that Christine was here last week, and she talked about this, and what she worked on for her part of the project is she started threading the fabric. So she learned from her mom how to straighten a piece of fabric by you pull a thread, you find its true grain. And so she started doing this. This was partly inspired by the idea of a growth chart in her home, where she had a growth chart that recorded the years of her children. And Christine is my youngest daughter's mother-in-law. So now my daughter is on that growth chart, and our grandchildren, so my grandchildren, Christine's grandchildren, they are also marked on that growth chart. But as Christine started working on this, she really felt a sense of embodiment of the history, and as she was taking apart, and she really felt the parallel of being a settler and being, just seeing this parallel of history, of being part of something that
has taken apart another culture by virtue of its presence. I find this really poignant. I find this really powerful, and I really love the idea of just visually of removing the threads in order to see or to reveal what's behind. And there's an artist in the States who does this kind of work too. Her name is Sonia Clark, and she uses the American flag, and she pulls the thread out. I don't have, I should have got an image of her so I could show you, but she does the same thing, and it's a way to undo history, or to take history apart and find new ways of looking at history and telling history. So these are the pieces, and then what I'll do is I'm going to put these all onto the banner as well when I have more of the pieces that are coming in. So that's kind of a background of what's going on with the project. The intention of the banner is that if we ever do get out of this, of our ongoing pandemic, what I'd like us to do is, all the people who contributed to it, is that we will go to the park with the banner and hold it in a circle so we can recreate that vision of the banner from the earlier project in 2006, 2007. And then it gives people an opportunity to embody the history and to carry their own history. And it's a chance to, what it is, it just makes a place to have the conversation for these, what can often be really difficult conversations as we grapple with the reality of colonization and if we need to make changes to it. So that's a history of the project. And then last week, as I was said, we made the little bags, and we did it by hand. It was kind of nice to make it by hand. It would go a lot faster by machine, but we did it by hand. And what was very cool was when I learned that I could not do the project in the park, at the same time I was reading Ursula Franklin's essay about the carrier bag, and I had already decided not to put these bags in plastic, put all the materials in plastic and send them to people in plastic. I thought people are going to be putting time and effort and care, and I thought that they should also receive something, something nice to work with, and something that they can use afterwards, and something that's not going to go to landfills. And this links to the carrier bag story, because what Ursula K. Le Guin does with that essay is, instead of thinking of the spear as humanity's first tool, she talks about the idea of the carrier bag and how it represents the notion of caring and taking care of each other and connection and things being intertwined. Somebody put the thank you Sherry for putting up that link in the chat. Appreciate that. Okay, so does anybody have any questions? Just feel free to raise your hand.
Just to let you know, I've allowed all participants to unmute themselves if they have any questions for Shawn. Once you are done, then I'll ask you to re-mute yourself.
Thank you, Paul. And if anybody would like to show their work from last week, or if you have any questions about any of the technique, did it work for you? Did it not work for you? And if not, we'll move on to the next part. Okay. So what I'd like to do is I'll show you what I'm doing for the embroidery of the tree limbs, or it's the suggestion of the tree limbs, because I don't have the skill to embroider a tree, so to make it look realistic, but I am going to embroider this so that there's the idea of the tree. And so this is very similar to the stitch that we did last week, where we did we did this hand stitching. Sorry, I'm just putting this underneath the camera so if you can see it. Okay, there. So this was the back stitch that we did by hand to give, you know, it's a little bit like the machine stitch. So I like this stitch because it's very similar to the embroidery stitch that I want to use. And it's very basic. And like I said, I don't have a lot of experience with embroidery, but it's always really good to learn new things. So you take your thread, take the embroidery floss, and the embroidery floss often comes in more than one strand. So you separate it. You don't need to use all 6 or however many come in. This was 6 strands. I've split it into a piece of arm length a thread that is got 3 threads in it. And I'm going to, whoops. I'm going to find the bottom. I'm going to find the hoop from underneath, and I'm going to start stitching from underneath. So I'm going to put it right here where I left off the last time I was working on this, and I'm just going to embroider a line across. So I'm just pulling it up, and so like the back stitch, and just like the title implies, you take the needle, and I like to put it in about halfway through, and then I just lift it up about a 1/4 of an inch in advance. And you can adjust this to, you know, if you want something very tight or something very loose, it's fine. And also if you want something more precise, you can also draw your image. And in this instance, I'm drawing a line with my thread, and I know that I'm picking up the line that I've already started, which I've just caught in the hoop, so I have the starting point. And then I'm going to continue. I had put some in, had done some very fast stitching a while ago on this, and I wasn't really crazy about the color combination. I really preferred the brighter yellow on the green, and also I was not very consistent with the stitching at all, and I thought it wouldn't make a difference, but in the end I really didn't like the way it looked, so I'm redoing that just to make the stitching a little bit tighter and a little bit neater. So I'm just going, so I've made my stitch, I'm going to go back so I do get a solid line. So I put it down, put my needle down and lift it through the other end. And I've got my hand under the hoops so that I'm also guiding the work this way. And I'm just going to eyeball it because it was just the stitching that I wasn't so happy with. That the line is fairly organic. It works in this instance because this is a large piece, and when people look at it, they just need to know that it's the idea of a tree. And I can't remember if I talked about this last week or not, but I chose the idea of the tree because I wanted a symbol. I wanted a unifying symbol. So even though there's a lot of trust, I'm handing the materials over to people, and I'm just letting them do what they want to do for the project. I did set some parameters, and that was color. So I'm working with an analogous colorway of the yellow, green, a little bit of blue. I do have a pop of magenta just for a little bit of contrast with the fabrics. And also the texture of the fabric, it all has the flowiness to it. And then back to the tree, I chose the tree because I've been walking in the park every day during the pandemic. So I was, getting to know the trees more. There's there's 5 just individual trees that I would always go and walk by every day. And also, I'm really quite fascinated with the idea of the natural world holding its own knowledge and carrying its own knowledge. And I thought the tree would be quite a beautiful symbol for this, because all the knowledge that's necessary is contained in that one seed, and then it just grows into a whole new tree. So I just really love that idea of generational knowledge. And so, oops, there we go. There we go. And I'm seeing, I see the comment from Athalie. So what you've missed is that I gave an overview of the project and talked a little bit about the bags that we started to make last week. And I asked people to share, if they want to, any images of their bags that they were making, or to ask any questions about any of the techniques. And now we've just moved on to the embroidery. And then after this embroidery part, which is very basic embroidery because I'm not an embroiderer, we're going to move on to some appliqué. And the intention is that you can use these techniques on your bag that you made, or any mending that you might want to do. So I'm just going under, oops, ahead. And I pull it taut, but not too taut, just so that it lies flat. And I'm trying to keep it fairly consistent with when I put the needle into the fabric, I'm putting it onto the same side of the preceding stitch. And I like that there's a little bit of texture because it echoes the texture of the bark that's implied on by the tree rubbing that I did earlier. I might actually take this back to the park and do it again, because I notice as time goes on, the oil pastel is becoming fainter. Part of the idea of the tree as well is to have these, like I imagined 5 trees, a portrait of 5 trees. And then in the exhibition, even though we can't everyone cannot be in person at the exhibition, I'm going to suspend the banner as if people were holding it. I'll suspend it from the ceiling, and I want to suspend it in a circle so we get the idea of the carousel. And then when people do come into the gallery, I'm sure people will be able to come into the gallery, you know, in small numbers. Then the idea is that it will stand in the middle of this carousel, and it will kind of, I'm hoping that it'll feel like being enveloped by an urban forest. So we'll see if that works. Oops. And that's the stitching. And then on the other side, it just makes a line as well. But, oopsies, there. And so this will be visible on both sides for the banner. And I actually have a larger hoop that I was using earlier, and I left that up in the studio. I don't know if I'll go back anytime soon until the the pandemic numbers are, until they start to go down, which hopefully they will. So I'm just going to take this off, and I'm just going to leave this stitch in here, so because I want to leave time to get to the applique. I think it's really important. And then that's what it looks like. Then the other part I wanted to add to the trees was well, this one is a maple leaf, but I've done another segment with a chestnut tree and with a chestnut bark, and I had wanted to put leaves on. So a couple of weeks ago, all the leaves are falling now. It's fall, and when I was walking, this enormous cluster of leaves fell down. It was probably actually knocked down by a squirrel, and it's quite big. There's 8 leaves on here. Look at that. And so what I want to do is just take each leaf and appliqué it onto the banner. And I thought also that would be really nice, appliqué onto the bags, the carrier bags. So I've made some patterns, little leaf patterns that I'm going to use to create these in fabric, and then I will place it onto the banner and stitch. So in order to do this, and this is the test sample one I did, and this you'll recognize, this was the lining fabric from the carrier bag I made, and this was the twill that I used. And so that's what it looks like on the outside. That's one leaf by itself. Looks a little strange, just looks like it could be, I don't know, a fish or anything. I mean, the composition is just kind of plain by itself. That's what it looks like on the back. On the carrier bag, of course, that won't be visible because there's the lining that it won't go through the lining. Or, I mean, if I was doing this, I wouldn't put the stitch right through to the lining. I would just make sure that I caught only the twill. So in order to do this, you'll take your fabric that you have that you want to use, and I recommend using a little bit of fuse on it. So this is just this is a piece of woven fuse. You can use woven or non-woven, and it has an adhesive on one side that's activated by heat, and then it's just plain on the other side. And then what that does, so this is that little piece of cotton, and it's been fused with the fuse. And then I've also this is one of my pop colors. So I've got the magenta. I've put the fuse on the back of it, and I have pinned one of the leaf patterns to it. And then what I'll do is I'll cut that out, and then I will stitch onto a piece of fabric using a ladder stitch, which I'll show you. Just to start, I'm going to cut this out. I have some others prepared as well, because there's 8 of these leaves in the entire cluster. But I'm going to start with this magenta, just because it's smaller and it'll go a little bit faster. Okay, so a couple of ways you can do this. If possible, I like to work on the cross on the diagonal, so working on a bias. If you have something geometrical, it's easier. This is an organic shape, so it doesn't really matter. And what you could do is you could trace it out with a pen or some sort of marker or a dressmaker's wax or chalk. But I've decided to pin it because I don't want any marks other than just the fabric and the thread that I'm using. I'm just reading the comments. I do like the texture of the back stitch as well. And the other nice thing about the stitching is I really like the evidence that it's been done by hand, which is why I'm not so fussy that it's perfect. Although I really admire when the level of excellence that some people achieve, it really is, it always leaves me awestruck when something is done so beautifully. So I do strive for it, you know, I don't always attain that. So I can cut this out and I can cut it right on the edge, but I'm actually going to just give it a little bit of a seam allowance, you know, just a scant 1/8 of an inch, just so that when I fold it under, when I stitch it, I don't lose the size of the piece. Although in this instance, it doesn't really matter. And you'll want to use fabric scissors if you have them, because paper scissors are just not great on fabric at all. And if you have paper scissors, just use your paper scissors on paper and other things, but never let anybody use your fabric scissors on paper. Another reason that I chose to fuse the back of this fabric is it will stop the fabric from fraying. Just for variety, I think I will do some of these leaves with no fuse. It will be more transparent on the finished product and it will fray. And I do want to work with that because I think it'll align nicely with the idea of threads that have been removed. And when I cut, I like to keep the bottom part of the scissor right down on a hard surface. And then you'll avoid these little glitches. I don't know if you can see that. I'm trying to get that as close as I can. Anyway, there's just like this little edge now that I have to fix because I lifted the scissors up. I should have kept it just straight on the table. And I also like to stand up. I realize I'm cutting this sitting down and so that I'm in front of the camera, but it would be nicer just to work standing up. And I'm just going to round off this edge. In this instance, I'm just going to lift my scissors in order to do that. Okay, and then initially I had wanted to stitch this right onto the banner, but it's really difficult with the banner up there, and I need to lay it out. And also I need to figure out where the leaf should go. And the leaf is part of a bigger image. So I'm just going to start with a test on this fabric, which is the same fabric as the banner. It's a two-toned polyester chiffon. And you can see it's 2 colors. So this was the darker side. So I dyed this teal at the same time as I dyed this gown, and so the dark teal turned out this color, this nice rich color, and the lighter lime color turned out more of like an emerald. And I think they're all really beautiful, actually. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to stitch this leaf onto this fabric. And I'm just imagining the whole cluster of leaves, which is why it looks like I'm starting in the middle of the fabric, which seems weird because typically when you work with fabric, you work with the edge so that you don't waste the fabric, especially because fabric these days is getting more and more costly. I'm just going to make time here. This might be a little bit hard to see. And I'm just going to tack this into place using some pins. In fact, I'll use the pins that are already here. So typically I would take this paper right off, but I'm actually going to leave it in here because it will be useful in that it's just going to keep this fabric spread out so it won't clump up in one area and not another. And this ladder stitch is, it's one of my favorite stitches because it's almost invisible when it's stitched. I'm just looking for the sample to show it to you again. Oh, here we go. So when I stitch this, I use the ladder stitch, and you can see the stitches if you look, but from a distance you really can't see the stitches. And this was in a contrast color, so it's that, it's this nice burgundy color against the gray, and it's still fairly discreet. You can use a contrasting color, but it's fairly discreet. And this is going to be a little bit different because the twill is a lot stiffer than the polyester. And you can use this stitch for mending. You could also use this stitch on the inside of the bag when you want to put two pieces together. If you've got two edges that you want to put together quite seamlessly. Okay. So I'm going to start down here. And I'll just start by putting my needle through the bottom. It's quite slippery fabric, so it's got a little bit difficult to work with. In fact, you might even want to baste this into place. Okay. So there we go. And last time I did a lot of anchoring because we were making seams and we didn't want the threads to come apart. This is appliqué, so the thread is knotted. It's not really necessary to anchor it with the 3 little stitches. Now what I am going to do is I'm going to fold the leaf over a bit, just a scant, less than 1/8 of an inch. And then I'm going to put my needle in across from, I'm going to stand up so you can see this. I've pulled my thread through the bottom of the green fabric. I've folded over the magenta fabric, and I'm putting it in the fold, and I pull it through. Oops. And go up. Oopsies. There. So you see that little cross stitch there, that's going to disappear. It's really quite difficult on this slippery fabric. I might go back to using the other one just to show you. And then I'm going to go down in the green and up. I think I will switch because this is going to be hard. I think it's hard to see. Okay.
So I'm going to quickly cut out this piece here from when I was preparing the sample. Okay, so I think this will be easier to show. So I'm going to pull my stitch up, my needle up from underneath. Oops. And then I'm going to fold. I'm going to pin that into place first. So I'm putting my needle into the top fabric, and I'm not picking up the bottom fabric, and that's about a scant 1/4 of an inch. And I want to encourage my top fabric, the appliqué fabric, to fold under. And so I'm using my thumbnail to hold it into place. I pulled the thread taut, but not too tight. I'm going to go back down into the twill. And there you can see it's about a 1/4 of an inch. And I pull it up, but I don't go into the top fabric. I pull it taut. You could also press these the edges at 1/4, an 1/8 of an inch or so under if you wanted to. And then I go into the top fabric, again about a 1/4 of an inch. I pull it up. I'm going to use my needle just to make sure that the raw edge is put under. And then I just give that a pull, and you can see like the stitching almost entirely disappears. And this is a technique that you can use, like it's a very versatile stitch. So it can be used for appliqué, like for quilts, or adding patches to garments or objects. And what you'll want to watch out for is as you move along, you just want to make sure that the tension of the fabric is not being pulled, so that your applique is not going to bunch up at any particular spot. And then if you wanted the contrast thread to be noticeable, you could make the ladder stitch, these are the ladder portions right here. You could just leave them a little bit, or you can just like tighten them to remove that. And I'm just going on top of the other stitching.
I'm sorry, Shawn, we've got a question from Zora. Hi, Shawn, can you explain how to sew the sides of the bag together, please? I've sewn my zip in so far. Thank you. Sorry, Shawn, you're muted. I'm sorry.
How's that? Can everyone hear me? Great. Okay. Okay, so I'm just going to put the applique to the side and go back to the bag. And Zora, if you wanted to, if you're comfortable showing your work by allowing the video, then we can I can take a look at where you're at exactly. Yes, please do. Please do unmute.
Hi, Shawn. What I've managed to do, I just wanted to know which way the zipper needs to face before I sew the sides in.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll try and put my camera on. If it's okay if I just stay off the camera but show my work, if that's okay?
Sure. Yeah, that's totally fine.
Thank you.
I don't see it yet. I just
Yeah, her video isn't up yet.
okay. Oh, it's not allowing you to? Okay, fine.
Well, now it has.
Yeah,
now it's
sorry.
always on mute. It's okay. And I'll just try to do the video next.
Okay.
Yeah, that works.
I think,
Magic.
hi.
Hi.
I just. Okay, so that's what I've made so far. I just wasn't sure. I know I need to have them right sides in to sew the. I just couldn't remember which way the actual zip has to go before I stitch along here.
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question. So, and I can help you with that. So what you'll do, it looks really nice. I'm so excited to see it.
Yeah, that's
very rewarding to see the work after having explained how to do it. So I'm just taking my bag and I'm just opened up the last bit. I think it'll be easier to explain just by showing. And that's in now. Which one is your the outer fabric?
But this is my outer fabric, the patterned one, and the grey is the lining.
Okay, so what you want to do is you want to take the teeth of the zipper and you lie those towards your lining fabric. So that would be towards the gray.
Okay, I think I did it the other way. I'll try and change it and show you.
Yeah.
So let's have the if I can. So towards. So point them. Is this correct? Like this?
Can you? Yeah. Can you just if you can just move it over a little bit? Yeah. Yes.
So open.
Yeah. That's correct.
This would be incorrect. Is that right? So this. That's incorrect. So they're pointing towards my outer fabric.
Yeah. So you want the teeth to be pointing towards your lining.
Oh.
So the other way you just had it.
Yeah, I think
that's correct. Yeah.
Is that correct? Okay. And then what I do is I stitch from here all the way to this bit. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah. And if the other side is already stitched, you'll want to leave an opening as well, so that you can turn it inside out.
Right. So then when I do my other side, I'll leave. I remember you mentioning not at the bottom, but somewhere, maybe here.
Yeah.
Or okay.
Yeah. And then you'll also want to before you turn it, like you'll need to keep your zipper open a little bit as well.
Okay.
So after you stitch the one side, because it is easier when it is closed, then you'll put your hand in and you'll open the zipper, so a space big enough that you can put your hand through to pull it to the outside.
Okay.
When you get to that part.
I'll try and do that during the session now, and hopefully have something to show you by the end.
Okay. That looks great.
Thank you. Thank you very much for helping out.
Thank you for the question. Okay. And so I'm going to keep moving with this appliqué. And so I'm just moving the edge. I'm going to move my pen here. I'm just trying to show you the actual ladder effect, so you get. The light is very bad. I'm sorry. That's too bright of a light. Oh, there. You can see it a little bit. When I was making banners for a living, and I was making all the cloth banners. I would use appliqué for the letters of the banners usually and objects. But I did it all by machine. I didn't hand appliqué. And so what that meant is that I would fuse everything so that it wouldn't fray. And then I would turn the fabric, I would do two things. I would either turn the fabric under and just straight stitch, or I would just keep the fabric raw and do a very tight zigzag stitch, which became an element of the design as well. But it is really nice to do handwork. And for this banner, I'm going to do a combination of raw edges and some edges turned under. And I guess I'll make the decision as I go along. Sometimes I'll have an idea in my head, but then when I actually do it, there'll be things that I hadn't thought of, or it's just not looking the way, doesn't turn out the way I thought it would. And then I'll just like change accordingly. You can also use this if you want like a very invisible hem as well. And the nice thing about having an organic shape, it's very forgiving. If I did a completely geometrical shape, I would need to be, of course, a lot more careful to maintain the integrity of the geometric shape. And then if you use a color of thread that's similar to or matching, then it really does become the stitching becomes very inconspicuous. And then just every, couple of inches or so, just, check out where you're at. Right now, I just moved my pin so that I could make sure that everything's lying flat, unless I wanted it bunched up. And here's the stitching. If you're going to be doing this on your bag, you can see when there's two layers, I'm only catching the one layer. So here is where the leaf is coming through, but I'm not taking the thread all the way through. Go back again. And if anybody would like to unmute themselves or put their video on, that's fine. And if you wanted to chat, I welcome that as well. And if you have any questions, or if you just want to let us know how you're doing, that would be great. And the silence is fine too. There's no need to fill up the silence, of course. I do want to talk about a piece that's coming. I haven't received it yet. There's a piece for the banner that my brother has made. He's a visual artist as well. He lives in Vancouver, so on the west coast of Canada. And so he attended one of the first Zooms that we had about the banner project and asked me a lot of questions about the area, because he doesn't live here. I live far away from my family of origin. And he was asking me a lot of questions about the streets in particular of the park, because I had talked about walking in the park every day during the pandemic when we were in lockdown. We were still allowed to go out for walks, and that's where I would go for my walk. So he told me his piece is ready to mail, and he sent me an image of it. And I really love it so much. He found it difficult to work on the fabrics that I included. And he was painting, so he found what happened is that the color, the ink or the paint that he was using was bleeding too much on the fabrics that I had put into his kit. So he ended up using pillowcases, and we're not sure, or he's not sure, if they belong to our late mother or his late mother-in-law. But they are these. It's a beautiful pillowcase with flowers that have been embroidered onto it. And so, he left that in just to talk about the idea of death. But then he did a painting of the full moon, kind of like a grandmother moon, because in that referenced the pillowcase of the grandmother, either my mom or the other grandmother. And then he embroidered the pathway that my daughter and I had always walked when she was young. We'd always go for what I called midnight walk. And that was just to wind down at the end of the day. We'd walk to the park. She'd usually play in the playground. And it was never midnight. It was, just about dusk usually. So it would have been after dinner and before bedtime. And there's, there was a route that we would have in the neighborhood. So I described the route to him, and he sent to me this image that's got a block of fabric with the streets. And I recognized the pattern when I saw the embroidery. I recognized the pattern. I thought it was really touching. And he also, because I had said, talked about it being a midnight walk, he painted it at night with the stars. And that also referenced the fact that we're walking on these paths that are really old already, or, they're paths that would have been shared by the people who lived here over the generations back into time. I thought that was very poetic. I think that's very poetic. So I'm really looking forward to receiving that in the mail. And he also put little paintings of trees from the park, the actual Grange Park that I've been visiting this year, which is obviously the same park that my daughter and I used to walk in. if when you're doing this applique and you want a bigger seam allowance, if you want like a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance, and that's fine too. And then you can press, it's easier to press under a 1/4 inch seam allowance. The only thing is that it won't fold under round curves the same way as a 1/8 seam allowance will. A 1/8 seam allowance, the fibers, they cross, but at 1/8 they'll open for you when you want to fold the fabric over it. A 1/4 of an inch they won't. So you would, if you come to a sharp corner, you would need to clip into the seam allowance in order for to achieve the curve in your design that you've used. So I'm just pressing it out, and I'm going to remove the pin now because it's mostly stitched on. And I'm just making sure that it's not, you know, puckered up or anything underneath. Here's the other stitching on the back. And so when I put the leaves on the banner, which I'm going to do in the next couple of weeks, it'll be double-sided, so there'll be the leaf on the one side and the stitching on the other. So if one is standing inside the banner when it's hung up in the exhibition, they'll see the leaves, but if you're walking around, you'll see the stitching. And then when you do come to a curve as well, you can make your stitches a little bit closer together to maintain the integrity of the curve that you want or the shape that you want. I'm just looking at the light. It's really quite, it bounces back off this white, so it's difficult to see. Sorry about that. And then if you really wanted the thread to be really quite invisible, you can just make your stitches a little bit tighter. So you would take your needle like a little bit closer to the edge of your appliqué fabric. And then you would pick up the under fabric. You would just like go right at the edge rather than just, I've been going like maybe a millimeter or so, but you can just like tuck it right in to get even tighter. And then it makes the stitching really quite invisible. And again, I'm just making sure that nothing's pulling up. It's actually pulling up a little bit on here, but that's okay. And then you can always press it out too afterwards. I mean, if it was really dramatic, I would take it out, take the stitching out and redo it. That's okay. And the nice thing about working with fabric and thread, there's always a little bit of give to it. And then as you work with the fabric, then you get to learn its properties as you work with it. And then you can use its properties in a way to suit you. And I'm just finishing off here this last little bit. So it's still a little bit tricky because I can't actually see it that well. So I'm just going to use the needle to encourage the threads, the raw threads, to go under. Oops. And this is why I fused it as well, so it doesn't completely fray there, but it is fraying a little bit. That's okay. And now I'll just anchor the end because this is done. And there's the appliques. And that's what it looks like on the reverse. And I would just give this a little press. There's a little bit minor puckering right there. I would just press that out. It's nothing too dramatic. Zora, is the zipper working for you?
I'm not yet there. I'm sewing it slowly, but I'm hoping to get to the zipper point soon. Hopefully.
Okay. Okay, great. Does anybody have any questions or would like to make any comments or any feedback about the workshop? Change my view to.
Hi, Shawn.
Hi there.
Fran.
Hi, Fran.
I had a question about the way you're doing it now is a little different than the way you just showed us, in that you have the pattern on top. And is that because it's a slippery material, or are you planning to embroider where the lines are? Or I was wondering why the difference.
Yeah. So I kept the pattern on just to give my surface a little bit of substance to work with, and but I'm actually still having difficulty with it because the fabrics are slippery. So what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to baste it, and then I will I think once I've basted it, I will remove the pattern, and that's the difference. It was just to give this a little bit of structure. Whereas the twill, it's already structured, and I could work with it more easily. And then this one was just slipping and sliding all over the place.
Makes sense.
Yeah. And then I would just I'm going to baste at just about 1/4 of an inch. And it's really slippery to work with. Well, thank you for your comment in the chat, Camille. I just lost my thread, so I'm just rethreading here. And you can tell the sun has moved because I can't see the hole on the needle anymore. So I use the threader. So now I've basted this leaf onto my fabric here. And for a very basic applique, that would work actually too, if you just wanted to baste it on. It's not very fancy at all that way. And there's just a little bit there where my thread ran out. I'm just threading the needle to start the ladder stitch. And another fun thing might be to try is to experiment and try using the embroidery stitch on the applique as well. Oops. And just to see what techniques, what new things you can make as well. I think it might be kind of nice to do the leaves with the embroidery, using the ladder stitch and a contrast color, and then that would create like little dots all around the edge of the leaf, which might be kind of cool actually. The cotton is much easier to work with. With the fabric being so slippery, I know what might happen is that it's going to fold on me when I'm not expecting it. And then I'll get like a little tuck in the work. So that'll be one of the things to watch out for. Another way would be to place this on a surface like an ironing board or something that you can pin, anchor your work to the ironing board so that it won't shift around on you. And then sometimes it just takes a while to get into the groove of doing, just learning how the materials are going to respond to the technique that you're using. And then, so if it's not working out, just like be patient and just give it a bit of time, and then you'll find your groove, and then it'll start to work. So you can see here, like I couldn't get it to fold under right there, so I just continued moving on. And of course I'll go back and I'll restitch that part. And with this very light fabric, I'm not pulling the thread as nearly as taut, because it's just going to start to gather the fabric, and I don't want to do that. And so consequently, the thread is more visible. Not there, but it's coming along. Oops. And if you have any questions about any other techniques, if I'm able to answer them, I definitely will. I'm working with these very thin fabrics, very flowy fabrics. If the stitching is not going to be visible from the other side, or if the other side was just not going to be visible at all, I would also fuse the base fabric. It would make it much easier to work with as well. It would just stabilize the work. And actually, I remember I used to do that when I was attaching letters, the fabric, letters in fabric onto fabric. I would actually keep the paper on and stitch right through. I went through a lot of sewing machine needles that way, but that was one way to keep the work stable while it was being made. So you need lots of bright light to do this and lots of patience. But it can be meditative. And it's kind of hard to see. But the appliqué is beginning to take shape. It's just, it's not wanting to fold right at the curve, which is why I'm struggling a bit with it here. Another way is to stitch the laddering, to do the laddering, and then you can also kind of encourage the appliqué to roll under as you pull it tight. Sometimes that'll work. And I see that we're close to 5 o'clock. 3 minutes to go. Message. Oh, thank you, Sherry. So I apologize. This is going slower than I thought on this fabric. I thought I would move faster with it, but I did not. So, but at least I got the cotton one done to show you. So I'll just have to, I think, just go with this one here. Thank you, Fran. And thank you so much to everybody for joining. I really appreciate it. And Zora, thank you so much for showing your bag in progress. That was quite a highlight for me to see.
Yeah, now I'm really curious on when she finishes it. I know she'll be happy with it.
You can have a laptop.
I haven't quite finished. You know, when your thread runs out and you have to rethread. So I haven't got very far. But I don't know if there's somewhere we could send photos to if we do finish. Would you like that?
Yeah, I would love it. Here, I'll send you. I'll send you my email.
And then, of course, on our Figment Toronto page, that would be fantastic to see that there too.
Yeah, I will do. I'll try and take photos of the stages
Yeah,
and then
great.
the end piece as well. I'll try and do that. But thank you so much. I've really enjoyed the 2 sessions, and it's been great to hear about the history of the project. And I look forward to and also, where could we see your exhibition? That would be great as well if I could make a note.
Oh, that would be so wonderful. So the exhibition will actually be happening on April 18th to the 22nd. And depending on pandemic, it will either be online or in person. And you can reach me at this email. So I put it in the chat, sgray@yorku.ca.
Yep, good.
And then also online at the top of the chat, I think is my... here it is again, my Instagram. So I'm making updates on the Instagram as well.
Okay,
Instagram is, it's probably the easiest.
Yep. So I'll go ahead to Instagram and hopefully get some photos to you soon. But thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for taking an interest in the project. I really appreciate it.
Well, and thank you, Shawn, for showing us your expertise and your passion for this.
My pleasure.
It has been a very big treat for me.